You are tuning in to the Cigar Guys podcast, where aficionados and newcomers alike gather to explore the vast cigar universe. Meet your host, Alexander Gonzalez, Mark Nikollaj, his big little brother Zachary Nikollaj, and Jared Burrows. So sit back, light up, and let's get the conversation started.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Cigar Guys podcast. Back in the studio today, Zach is here, sitting in Mark's seat.
We're switching it up.
Jared's here.
In my seat.
In his seat. And then we have a special guest with us today. We have Miguel Schoedel here in the studio, representing Crown Heads, Oz Family Cigars. So we're going to be smoking some cigars and talking about them and, of course, the cigar industry. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you guys for inviting me on the show.
No, it's awesome. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely, man. And, I said this a little earlier, but I always appreciate you guys that put work into these podcasts. It's just an incredible opportunity for people around the country to connect over cigars. You know, back in the early or late 90s, there wasn't any of this. So I love the fact that cigars, which are very old school, the rolling, these things have not changed much. But the fact that we're able to use today's technology to reach out to other brothers and sisters of the leaf around the country, I think is pretty awesome, man.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great fun. I mean, we get to talk to people all over the world. So it's great how people are able to use the technology to keep in touch and showcase all these different brands. Because, I mean, these cigars we're smoking today, too, a lot of times you can't get them in many other countries outside of the United States. So it's a way for people to say, hey, what can we get when we come to the United States? Because we're always going and looking for Cuban cigars and stuff like that. But people can come here and pick up some great cigars too.
100%.
So we're all smoking the same thing. Tell us a little bit about what we're smoking right now.
So this is called the Las Calaveras Décimo Aniversario, which means 10th anniversary. So in 2014, John Huber created the original Las Calaveras blend. And we do that with Don Pepin Garcia from the My Father Cigar Factory. It's an annual release, gets released every summer. And it's really based around the idea of kind of Dia de los Muertos, which is November 1st, November 2nd, which is a Mexican cultural religious holiday, celebrates the lives of those that have passed away. So every year since 2014, we release a blend. And really small on the bands of those Las Calaveras, there are initials of people that have passed away. It could be people in the industry. It could be people that have a lot of meaning to us, a musician, an artist of some sorts. So, Old Man Fuente, Old Man Olivas, Old Man Padron's initials have been on here, along with family members. I've had my uncle's initials on one year's blend. Wow. So this year, we released the Las Calaveras 2024. This is 2025 now. We released the Las Calaveras with the pink and black band.
Okay.
Alongside that, we released a very small run of this blend here. It's an Ecuadorian Oscuro wrapper, Nicaraguan filler binder, one size. This is the 10th anniversary, meaning we've had 10 different Las Calaveras blends in the market. And it's just a way to celebrate, a way to say thank you to all the consumers that made Las Calaveras what it is today, one of the more sought after limited editions, annual releases that come out every year. So it's a very special blend. John Huber worked on it with the family down there from my father, and they've done an incredible job, and it's sold out. I would tell people, if you see it in the retail shops, pick it up. $18.95 MSRP, depending on where you're at in the country. But our German distributor sold out in one day.
Wow! So
even in Germany, over in Europe, they're loving that blend as well. So we're very proud to have that cigar. Just really is a way to translate, something that we're passionate about and put into a cigar. And obviously, I think what makes a cigar interesting is not just the smoke, not just the tobacco, not just who makes it, but also what is the story behind that particular cigar, right? Every cigar, every name has a reason. Monte Cristo, that was named after the Count of Monte Cristo, the book, because back in the day, before they had radio, before they had iPods and iPads, they would have a lector. A lector was a person who would sit at the front of the rolling room and they would read the newspaper, they would read books, and that's how we got the brand Montecristo. That's how we got the brand Romeo and Julieta, because they were reading Shakespeare. And so names play a lot into also the creation of these cigars and these brands. So John Huber from Crown Heads, he's the one that, is really behind all of the design, the picking of the blends. These are his babies, and he keeps that tradition going.
Wow. So you're obviously very well versed in cigar history as well.
Yeah. I would call myself a person that's very in tune to the entire history of tobacco, where it's native to, where it's come to, how we got into what we know today as a cigar, and I pride myself on that.
Yeah. No, for sure. A lot of people don't know much history about cigars. We've done one episode in the past, essentially where cigars came from. Like you were saying before we were recording, it's American.
Yes.
Tobacco is from America.
It is.
And they took it back to Europe. But originally it was, the Mayans or other Native Americans that were growing tobacco and smoking it. But yeah, I mean, even like stuff like that, a lot of people don't know how Montecristo started. I actually didn't know that. Yeah. So, you just taught us something new.
Yeah, Punch. The brand Punch, the old little cartoon. That we're reading Punch.
Yeah, okay.
To the rollers. You know what I mean? And obviously you can only read the newspaper so much, right? So they got into books and things like that. And if you go to a cigar factory, let's say 1880, if we could go back in time, they look damn near the same. The only difference is there's no lector anymore. They're still using the same kind of molds, to roll cigars, the same kind of techniques. But today they've got salsa music and merengue music playing, you know what I mean? But tobacco is native to the Americas. That's a question I love asking at events. A lot of people don't know that. Europeans did not see tobacco until 1492. And then obviously it became it became its weight in gold. And if you are interested in American history, the old red, white, and blue, I mean, the colonies were really built on the back of tobacco. Yeah. And trading tobacco overseas. And so tobacco really became kind of this cash crop that helped build the foundation of the United States of America that we know today. But it goes back so much further to that,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Pennsylvania, Virginia, all the farms they had. They kind of made them smaller into cigarettes because the Europeans were always moving around. They needed something quick. There wasn't much sitting around the campfire like the Native Americans were.
Well, cigarettes really was looked at as a bastardized form of the cigar, and really what
still is.
Yeah, still is. Yeah. I said used to.
I agree. What we see that change was World War I, World War II, where soldiers could not carry cigars with them. And so cigarettes were really the thing that came about. And then when you had soldiers coming home from World War II, they were given cigarettes when they landed back in the rations going over to Europe to fight. They were given cigarettes. So you had this generation of people that smoked pipe and cigars. And then when the wars, World War I, World War II happened, we saw a switch to cigarettes. So, cigars really just was this cumbersome product that you would love to enjoy. But when you're over in a foxhole, it was not something you could smoke quickly and it needed humidification, and cigarettes didn't. So that's where we saw the change in history. And I'd like to think that, with 98% of cigars that are sold in the United States are machine-made cigars, grenadiers and those kinds of things. 2% is handmade premium cigars. So even to this day, it is still a very small kind of niche product. Yeah. When you live in it like we do, it obviously seems a lot bigger. But but we are the number one consumer of premium handmade cigars in the world, the United States of America. Yeah. Part of it is our size, and part of it, I think, is our history. Cigars are in our DNA.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, even I just flew back from Europe this weekend, and cigars, there was, I think where I was, no cigar shop in the area. There's places that sell cigars, and you could smoke in coffee shops and stuff. That's no problem. But the cigar selection was very minuscule compared, to their cigarette collection. Yeah. I'll just say. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, from what I've seen personally, much larger in America.
Way larger. Yeah, way larger. And we don't have that Cuban cigar, so when people come to the United States from Europe, they come the opposite way. You went there, when they come here, they're pretty much blown away, especially over the last 10 years. But now that the Cubans have priced themselves on the Hong Kong Chinese pricing market, we're seeing more non-Cubans being imported to Europe now. Yeah. And so Europeans are becoming much more savvy about Dominicans, Nicaraguans, Hondurans. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I noticed that too. There's definitely a lot fewer Cuban cigars there than normal because of that, because of, they price themselves out of the market, and those are, the new world cigars all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, there's been really in a lot of Europe, there is still big cigar and tobacco regulation over there.
Yep.
So there's some countries you go to and you can't find cigar shops or lounges. And if you go to a country that does have them, they have so much regulation that, like, for example, if you go to London, it's a tasting room essentially.
Yeah.
So they have a certain way around it, but it's very limited because we can't go out and open a cigar lounge in most countries in Europe easily.
Yep.
In America, if you have the money, you can do it.
Yeah.
Pretty much no problem.
Yep.
But out there, it's so much more complicated.
Yeah, even us importing or exporting our cigars to Europe is a lot harder now. There's a thing called track and trace that the European Union is doing, where basically every single stick, they have to have paperwork to trace it every which way it's gone back to the factory.
Wow.
It's wild.
And when I tell you back in the day, we would find a distributor. Maybe you were a distributor in the Netherlands, and we would say, okay, you want to do business with us? You want to sell our cigars in the Netherlands? All right, we would ship you cigars from the factory. It'd be one, little bit of paperwork. Now there has to be this it has to go to like a bonded warehouse in Europe and all this kind of stuff. And there's this unbelievable amount of paperwork, and then registration of each brand and blend. I tell people, regardless of how you feel about tobacco, when regulation becomes a point of, difficult or making it impossible to do business, that's not good for anybody. That's not good for commerce. That's not good for, I just think, in democracy in general. Right? Yeah. So we see it harder now to do business in Europe, even though there is a higher demand now for premium handmade cigars outside of Cuba for Europe. And we've seen that across the board.
Yeah. I knew that a lot of the times, if you were to ship to a European country, you do have to go through a distributor of some sorts. I didn't realize that it was now that extensive of a process to even have that done.
For the European Union, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Depending on the country. Look, we don't do business in Australia, New Zealand because of the regulations. European Union, it's a lot of work.
But it's doable.
Okay, yeah. There's countries that are not in the European, like UK just left the European Union. So it's a little bit of different kind of paperwork and different kind of, warnings. Look, I do business in Canada. I do all of our international for Crown Heads and Oz Family Cigars. I got to tell you, Canada's crazy.
Yeah.
Canada
no bans.
The band is underneath a green band. So when you walk into a humidor in Canada, every cigar looks the same because they all have to have the same green band that covers the other band. And then most of us got rid of boxes because the boxes have to be the same color. So we got rid of boxes. So a lot of cigars are being sent in either cardboard boxes or in bundles. So if you can imagine, you go into a shop in Canada, let's say you want a Cohiba Siglo 6 or whatever, right? $150 a stick, $200 a cigar. It's in a cardboard box on the shelf with a green band. It's bizarre. But we at Crown Heads and Oz, we've been very supportive of our Canadian distributor, Brigham, up there, and we've played the game, and we've had success up there and continue to do so. I did a cigar for Canada this year called Moose Kick, which was a small limited run we did for Canada. So we didn't turn our back on Canada. It's just a lot more difficult to do business there. And then here, even though we do fight regulation and price and the taxes, it is a much fairer fight here than it is in other countries.
For sure, yeah.
We were just talking about generational ban.
That's scary. That's very scary.
Very scary. We just saw someone in Indiana propose a bill to have generational ban smoking in Indiana. We've seen it in Hawaii proposed.
Basically prohibition for cigars.
Yeah, basically saying that, as long as you're alive, you can smoke, but your child will never be able to legally buy tobacco. And that's what a generational ban is. They'll just pick a random year and say anyone born after this year can never buy tobacco. And can you imagine, you have a business, a tobacco business that maybe your grandfather started, sold it to your father and sold it to you. And then for them to say, hey, we passed a law, you're the last guy that's going to own it because your business is going to be worth zero. Because that next generation will never.
And what are you gonna do? You can't sell the business.
No,
right?
It'd be worthless at that point. So those are the kind of things that are scary. But I'd much rather do the fight here than in some of the other countries.
No, for sure. Imagine going to a cigar lounge in Canada and trying to browse for specific cigars, that's almost impossible. I'm sure they have them written there and stuff, but
being introduced to new brands is almost impossible in Canada.
Imagine doing it colorblind.
yes. Well, I guess
they're all one color.
Oh, so I mean, yeah, but you can't see that color. I guess it doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah.
But
But that does suck though, because a lot of people remember what the band looks like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And that's why, cigar companies spend so much money and development in their band, their cigar band, because they know they want it to be recognizable. Hey, you smoke that cigar, I'm never going to forget this. Right?
Yeah, I think that if you look at the history of cigars, you can't get away from the packaging.
Mm-hmm.
The boxes and the printing. Like when you see boxes from the 1890s or 1910, 1920, the embossing, the gold flick. I mean, it's an art. It's an art.
Yeah,
and it does not affect the taste of the cigar. You can have the greatest cigar in the world, and you don't need a beautiful box or a band. But just like anything else, you're proud of it. You want to present it properly.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Driving a really expensive Mercedes is going to feel the same no matter what the outside of the car looks like, because you're worried about the inside.
Exactly.
But if the outside is pretty, you're proud of you want to show it off. And that's why all of us in the industry spend so much time on bands and packaging, because you are proud of the product that you're putting out, and you want it to be, you want it to look nice. You want it to be presentable.
Well, if Canada does join the United States, so maybe that regulation will kind of become more lenient.
I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like we were talking before look, I can name Democrats and Republicans around the country that have put either taxes, bans, generational bans coming from both parties, and you just get kind of nervous, because at this point, if you're in tobacco, you don't know who your friend is, right?
Yeah, who do you support?
And in the cigar business, the cigarette industry isn't our friend.
right.
They don't like us. The cigarette industry are the ones that push the regulation on us.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a big thing. Is we've seen it in different states. Florida is not one of the states that do this, but I believe there should be a differentiation for premium hand-rolled cigars and cigarettes.
Yeah.
Right. Florida doesn't do that. They combine them together.
Mm-hmm.
You can't smoke inside in a restaurant. You can't do this. But like we go in Michigan, and Michigan, you could have full-on restaurants that allow cigar smoking.
Yeah.
But if you smoke a cigarette in there, they could shut you down.
Yeah.
Because they, make that difference. They have a fine line that says, hey, this is a premium tobacco product. It's not a cigarette.
Yep.
There's not a boatload of chemicals going in it.
Yep.
Right. You're just enjoying it. And I believe that they should make that, line for the whole country.
Yeah, I agree
Was
too.
that generational ban, was that purely tobacco, generically?
Tobacco.
Okay,
Yep,
yeah.
tobacco. And I think they include even vape into that as well, but it was really for cigarettes and cigars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always say it's
If
kind of like
it's just
that.
cigarettes, I'd have been like, well,
Well, this is the thing is, like, as cigars, we get thrown in with cigarettes so much. We
Yeah,
find ourselves
yeah.
defending cigarette industry,
Yeah.
although they're one of our biggest enemies.
Yeah.
The anti-smoking groups and the cigarette groups. The cigarette groups are like, hey, listen, we want them regulated because we don't want people quitting cigarettes to smoke cigars. So we're fighting them along with the anti-smokers. So it's this kind of the syntax we get thrown in this big kind of lump with the cigarette people, in which we know, through all the things that have come out over the years, the cigarette industry advertised to kids and all these kind of things, and it's just a different world. I mean, liquor, there's flavor bans in California right now, and there's talking about flavor bans in Indiana and other states as well. I just saw Indiana for flavored tobacco.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
And they'll say, well, if you have a grape flavored cigar or a vanilla flavored cigar, you're trying to get kids smoking. And my answer always is, listen, go down any liquor store and go down the vodka aisle, whipped cream, birthday cake flavored vodkas. Like, they don't say anything to the liquor industry.
Right.
But as soon as we use vanilla in a cigar, we don't have any flavored cigars like Crown Heads or Oz Family Cigars, but our base where we all came from was CAO. And part of CAO's arm was a line of flavored cigars that we had, Moon Trance, Bella Vanilla, and all these kind of things. they were great sellers, and they were adults that liked smoking them. And no one is buying a handmade premium cigar, cutting it open, putting marijuana in or anything, or kids are out there smoking. You'll never see a kid on a corner smoking a Las Calaveras, that costs $14 or something. It just, I feel like the politicians that make these rules are so far disconnected. I think that's why it's important. The PCA, the CRA, all these organizations that fight for our right. You talked about Michigan. Look, Michigan, we had a very high tax in Michigan. I remember, I've been in the industry now 21 years. And I remember the tax in Michigan was horrible. And all of the cigar shops got all the cigar brands. We started raising money. They were able to get a lobbyist, and that lobbyist fought for a 50-cent cap in Michigan. And it passed. And what it was that basically it was like referendum where it was, hey, for the next 2 years, we're going to see how much taxes we collect at a 50-cent cap compared to the 32 or 40% tax that we had. And if we collect more on the 50 cent,
we'll keep it.
We're going to keep it. And they kept it.
Yeah.
And through that came a cigar bar license. So in Michigan, you can get a cigar bar license. There's an actual license for that, like a restaurant license or whatever. And when you have those kind of things set up, you can see how successful it is in Michigan. You don't have kids hanging out in cigar bars. If you want to go have a steak, there are cigar bars in Michigan. You can have a great steak, have a great pour of a Macallan, and then have a cigar at your table. And that is dying out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's try to do that in New York City or Chicago, some of these great American cities, and you can't do it. But then you go to Maryville, Indiana, and you can do it. Or you can go to outside of Detroit and do it. Know. So
no, it's a great point, though. I mean, having a lower tax on the cigars will ideally allow people to want to spend more on cigars, or they're not turned off by it entirely.
Yeah.
So, not that this is a great thing, but you're giving the government more tax in a way because people are buying more cigars.
But the limit prevents people being priced out.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, like in New York, the Toro Fuente curly head, is, and I bring it up all the time. That's why Alex
Like $14.
But a box there versus a box here, it's literally $70 here, I think. And then I bought it over there for $150.
There's only 3 states that have no tax, extra tax on cigars.
Right.
And that's New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Mm-hmm. And then you have Texas, which is a penny. Outside of that, every state has a thing called an OTP, other tobacco product. So that license usually covers anything but cigarettes. So vape, it could cover pipe tobacco and cigars. And every state is different. That's why, I never quote prices because I travel the whole country.
Yeah, it's hard.
And it's hard because it can literally be an $80 difference depending on what state you're in.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, since we're in Florida, we'll say, we paid $12 for the cigar. And then you think about it, and it's like, well, someone might be paying 18 or 30 depending on which state they're in.
Yeah. Yeah, look, that cigar that we did, our most expensive cigar that we've ever done at Crowned Heads or Oz would be the cigar you have in your hand right there. It's $18.95 MSRP, which all the $50, $100 cigars have been released over the last couple of years. Yeah. It's a deal, right?
This is around the average now.
But the cigar I did for Canada, the Moose Kick, that was $30-something.
Wow.
Canadian.
I like the name.
Stick. Well, we have a cigar called Mule Kick. And my Canadian guys were joking about doing something about mooses, and we just did a small run. I said, let's just have a little fun with it and call it Moose Kick. I
like it.
But $30 a stick up there. That would be maybe a $10 cigar in the U.S.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And so, but I will say that the people that are smoking in those countries with the high taxes, they're devout, man.
Yeah.
I do events in Canada every year. They have to be outdoors. You can't smoke in a cigar shop there. They're always outdoors on the patio or in a garage or whatever. And the guys that show up are devout. They're dedicated to the hobby, and it's an expensive game.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to a cigar shop or you see people smoking in Europe. It's usually more fluent, white collar, and then they come to the United States and they go, "Man, I was in a cigar shop." I've met guys that have traveled to Michigan for the car industry, and they'll go, "Man, I was in a cigar shop, and a guy came in. He was dirt under his nails. He was smoking cigar." You'd never see that in Europe. I said, because in this country, you can get a $5 cigar, you can get a $100 cigar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where over there you can't. So that's another reason why the United States is so cool.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense too. You have places like Canada or in Europe where they are super big cigar guys because they're the only ones that haven't been priced out. Mm-hmm. If you're going to buy a cigar in these countries, you love cigars because you're willing to spend $30 on a $10 stick or whatever.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, especially, the more taxes go up, the governments collect more tax, they spend more, then they need more, and it just goes up, up, and up, and up. So it's become a white-collar hobby in most places around the world.
Yeah.
I'm very proud that we haven't done that in this country,
Yeah. I think if anything, I mean, it's become a very more accessible hobby as time has passed, it feels like, or at least the trend has gone up quite drastically of people that are getting into cigars.
Yeah.
A lot of women are starting to get into it.
Fastest growing demographic is African American and women.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of places in all around the country that have their own demographics. You can have like you said, a cigar lounge that's in a predominantly white area. You have one in predominantly Black or Hispanic areas.
Yep.
Here, it's like a total different ballgame. I mean, you walk into the cigar lounge across the street and you got all types of people there.
Everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah. The amount of women that smoke cigars in the United States is unbelievable. And when I started 22 years ago, if there was a woman in a cigar shop, you're like, wow, man, what is up with her? That's strange. Now I've done events where it's almost 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredible.
Especially
I
if you have a pairing too, right?
Yeah. Yep. I've seen it where, the husband's smoking a nice mild Connecticut and the wife's smoking a full body, robust, Crown Heads Juarez or something like that. And I go, wow, okay, I like that, or
Nice,
more and more
yeah.
shops are being owned by women, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah, that is true. Big push for women in cigars. I mean, I think there's a group now. It's like the PCA for women and stuff like that. So they're doing a lot of these like women's groups that are, supporting cigars, supporting the industry and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, you young guys, you can go to a bar, corner bar. Maybe there's a fight that breaks out. People are drinking, getting trashed. You don't see that in cigar bars.
No, you don't.
You don't see that. It's much more relaxed, kick back. And, I've talked to women who don't smoke, but their husbands smoke, and they'll come by the shop and they've gotten to know the guys, and they'll say, I would much rather have my husband here than some corner bar. And now I think cigar shops that are owned by guys, the bathrooms are a little cleaner, the seats are a little bit nicer, so now it's a little bit more welcoming to women, and I think that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
really awesome.
And two, if you have a lot of places that we go to, if you do have an incident like that, usually it's very quickly to be like, all right, like get this guy out.
Yeah, it's taken care of.
They'll
Very
trespass him or something if you went way over the line, because you don't want to have that type of atmosphere in a cigar lounge. It's supposed to be very relaxing. Everyone's hanging out, having conversation. It's not a dive bar.
Yep, 100%. Yep.
So we've got here the Las Calaveras 10th anniversary. Super good cigar. I'm really, really enjoying it. I had I think the 2023 about a month or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one's with the broadleaf wrapper. This one I enjoy a lot more. And I know you said it's medium full.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's more medium.
Yeah.
It's such a smooth cigar. It's very smooth.
Well, I always tell people, like, body and strength are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, to me, the biggest kind of misconception in the business, along with dark cigars are strong. Like, that's not always the case.
Right.
And strength is what really is the effect you feel off of the nicotine. Body is the heaviness or the chewiness, the thickness and the heaviness of the smoke. So you can have a medium strength cigar that's very full bodied. To me, medium strength, full bodied cigar. But, something I learned from John Huber of Crown Heads and learned from Tim Osgener of Oz Family Cigars is that when they're looking to put Ligero in their cigars, they're not looking for young Ligero that has edge. And if you ferment Ligero properly, it should have a very nice full bodiness, but it shouldn't have a nicotine level that knocks you out. Mm-hmm. Now, there are plenty of those cigars in the industry that are out there that use either young Ligero or under-fermented Ligero to give a cigar its oomph. But even a cigar that has a lot of Ligero should still have a smooth characteristic to it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think this cigar has. And look, I know I work for the company, right? But the feedback on this cigar has been absolutely incredible. And when you're able to do something special and work with a factory like my father is obviously one of the most respected independent, brands, factory, family in the industry. We're very proud that they work on these blends for us every year. They do Lamperios and Jericho Hill core lines for us. They do Las Calaveras once a year, but this is something that we're very happy that they made room in their schedule to make for us this past year.
No, it's very good. Yeah. And you bring up a good point too, because we've either recommended cigars or we've given some of our cigars to people, and we'll tell them like, this one's medium body and this one's full body. If you give them the full body one, they'll be like, oh, it was like, it wasn't strong at all. I didn't get like a super nicotine buzz because that's what they're looking for.
Yep.
Or you give them the mild medium one, they're like, oh, that was way too strong.
Yeah.
But because they're used to smoking cigars that are super weak in nicotine content, they want something that's really they're not going to feel at all.
Yeah.
So there's still that confusion, and I do it too sometimes. Like I think I just did it really where I was like, well, it's not that strong. I associate that still with the body.
Yeah.
I get it kind of mixed up, but I know better.
No, it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us.
For me, it's like I kind of blend it as the overall experience. Like, does it come off as strong and like, does it kind of punch you in the mouth? That's going to be more full body.
Yeah.
If it's very smooth, I tend to say more medium mild, just because that's like kind of the association I use with the cigars.
Yeah. Tim Osgener, Tim is a guy who, he was born into the industry. His family's been in the business since 1968. Tim's a guy, he likes to blend his cigars where the first inch maybe will punch you a little bit to grab your attention, where John blends very differently. John's been in the business since the early 90s. John wants to create this like consistent flavor from light to end. So even within the cigar maker, the cigar blender, they each have their own unique way of how they do things.
But even the consumer, some consumers, they like the fact that the cigar is the same throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people, they like that it changes.
Middle, and an end. Yeah.
They're like, I want it to be, different flavor from beginning to end because I don't want to get bored with it.
And that affects their ratings. They'll say, well, it didn't have any change up, so I didn't really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it changed up too much. For me, I don't mind either or. If I enjoyed the cigar and the way it tastes, then it's a good cigar. If it is the same throughout, but I enjoyed it the whole time, that's a great cigar. If it does change up the first, second,
and
third,
I still enjoy it.
Yeah. So that to me personally would never affect the rating. Well, it wasn't complex or it didn't change up at all.
That's why I think ratings are so subjective these days. Mm-hmm. When you look at top 25 lists, it really up to the individual on what they like, what they enjoy.
Yeah.
If you make a Connecticut cigar and it is out of this world, maybe Cigar Aficionado is never going to get a great rating because they like more medium to full body, stronger cigars, right? So depending on who's rating a cigar and what their perception of what a good cigar is, I like to look at the maker, look at their track record, and that's why I think brands like Tatuaje, you can look at Pete Johnson, you can look at Jaime Garcia from My Father, you can look at John Huber for Crown Heads, and these guys, I've known this guy, I know what he blends, I know how he makes his cigars, and you're not surprised. If you're smoking Saka, you tend to know what Saka makes and what he enjoys. And it's the same thing. Same thing with a distiller. If you know that a certain distiller, this is the way they blend their whiskeys or their scotches or their rum. I know what to expect. You know what I mean? Not that they can't throw you a curveball once in a while, but you kind of know what you're. If you're going to smoke a La Flor Dominicana, 99% of the time you know what you're getting from Lito. You're going to get a punch in the face.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Everyone's got their own signature
100%.
in the way they do things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this too in terms of the ratings. The mainstream ratings, they're being questioned now because you see a lot of the same stuff in the top 25 list.
Yeah.
Year after year.
You can almost predict.
Yes, which we did. We predicted quite a few of them.
Like, are they being paid for? Or?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
But our thing is like maybe do it in such a way where you're able to highlight more brands. So that way, like, for example, you're not going to have 3 or 4 of the same brand cigars in the top 25 that kind of dominate the market. Do it in such a way where you can showcase more brands because, like you said, they're each different. All the cigars are different, but each brand has its own kind of signature and its own feel, the way it tastes and the way it smokes. So you're able to kind of showcase different brands and make it seem at least a little more fair, if that makes sense.
And then you look at the top, like Cigar Aficionado's top 25, you can look at the different brands and go, I know who's going to be in the top 10 every year, just who's jockeying for 1 and 2, right? It's even less if you just go back to the factories, right? Because if you have a list where you have, let's say, maybe a Crown Heads, a Tatuaje, and a My Father in the top 25, those are 3 different brands. But the fact is, they come from one factory.
True, yeah.
So one year, Ernie EPC won Cigar of the Year. He's won it several times, but there was one year where he won number 1. And then a cigar he made for Alec Bradley, Gatekeeper, was in the top 25. And then a cigar he made for us, the Capa Especial, was in the top 25. So there were 3 cigars 3 different factories or 3 different brands, 1 factory. So when you break it down to even factory, it gets even smaller.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
But there are so many great boutique brands out there. I think the beer industry has really seen what the microbrew did for the beer industry. That's what boutique brands do. I think boutique brands are really the creative force in our industry. Everything from different kind of wrappers, different kind of packaging, full body, big ring gauge. That none of that came from the big brands.
Right,
that all came from independent boutique guys doing things out of the norm, and then they caught on and became popular.
No, that's very true. Yeah, because in this industry, or in the beer industry, or pretty much any industry, you have your big guys that are the mainstream.
Yep.
And when people want something different, they have to get creative, do it themselves, start a new brand, whatever.
Yep.
But that's what's been driving innovation is all these, smaller boutique brands, and then maybe they grow into something much larger. But this industry right now is seeing a lot of innovation because people are asking for something new. They don't want to keep smoking the same stuff over and over again. And we've seen recently all these new brands come out.
Yeah.
Saka was saying over 300 brands a year is like kind of the new norm right now.
Yep.
So a lot of people are starting to get creative with it. And you have people like Alfonso at Selected Tobacco that does a completely different process in the way he ages it. So you have that uniqueness of it. I think that the industry is just heading more towards how can we stand out from the rest.
Yeah. And I do think that's like a generational thing too, just because, if you look at just the liquor market, right? Everyone was so content with their, Budweiser, with their Grey Goose or their, all the standard liquors and beers and whatever. And then, you're right. We saw that craft beer industry come out. Then we started seeing a lot of, specialty bourbons, whiskeys.
Yep.
Then we started seeing a lot of, specialty cigars, boutique cigar brands. And all those boutique brands, whether it was beer, liquor, or cigars, they came out with a story.
Yeah.
They showed the process of how they did things. It wasn't just, hey, I'm going to buy Davidoff just because it's Davidoff. And my dad bought it and his grandfather bought it, whatever. It's, hey, I want to learn about the cigar, where it comes from, what kind of wrapper is in it, what kind of binder, what kind of everything. And you learn, the past probably 15 years, 10, 15 years, that's where we saw that change happen where, people want to experience stuff that they're tasting. That's why you start seeing a lot more craft cocktail lounges come out. There's a lot more.
The word mixologist.
Yeah, mixologist. Yeah. I mean, it's insane. Like you go to a craft bar and you sit there, you have a show. They're going to show you how they make their drink, use a specialty ice because it keeps your drink cooler longer or looks better.
Less impurities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, we're seeing that in the cigar industry now.
We talk about like history of cigars. To find a box press cigar in the 80s was almost impossible.
It's true.
It wasn't until 96 where Padron did the Aniversario. They kind of brought that old box press, which was kind of out of vogue. In the 80s, Figurados at one time ruled the cigar industry in the 20s and the 30s. Everything was a Figurado. And then it died out. And what we have here is what we call Parejo. Parejo is a word that a lot of people don't use in the industry or know. Parejo just means straight-sided cigar. It's a round cigar.
Yeah.
And Parejos took over. Everything was Parejo. And then in the 80s, the Fuentes put out the Hemingway series, which were all Figurados. That size was dead. No one was making Figurados anymore. So, and we say Fuente today or Padron today, people think huge. But back in the 90s, Padron wasn't as big as they are today. In the 80s, it wasn't, Fuente wasn't what it is today. So those were kind of independent boutique brands that did something or brought something back that obviously affected the industry. Now you go into a cigar shop, you'll see Figurados, you'll see box press. We forget kind of where those trends had come from. They died and they were brought back by an independent brand or whatever it is, which is kind of neat when you look at the history of how these shapes and things have come about.
Even flavors too. I think we talked about previously. At one point, the number one cigar in the United States was a Candela cigar, or were Candelas.
Yeah, actually, the nickname of Candela was AMS. American Market Selection, because they were only popular in the United States.
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
And that was because, people either couldn't handle the strength of Cuban cigars coming out, or, whatever other reason there was. But then it changed. Then people started enjoying other types of cigars, and then that's when that kind of started to die off because we don't see much of that anymore.
Right. Back then it was, you smoked one of three wrappers. You smoked AMS, which was American Market Selection, which were Candelas. You smoked SMS, which was Spanish Market Selection, which were darker, or EMS, which was English Market, which was more of your Colorado colored. So those were the three kind of colors that you would smoke.
Okay, yeah.
And Claro was a Connecticut, right? And so we've seen those terms kind of die away or whatever. And Candela completely died. I mean, it was the number one selling wrapper in the United States, 20s, 30s. And then now we see Candela come back, once a year, usually around St. Patty's Day, or people use it to create these unique, fun barber pole pinstripe cigars. But AMS Candela definitely has a great history in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, even now, even the big brands, they might have one cigar that's a Candela. And
like a Toro Fuente's always going to have at least one.
The Lugione usually has one.
Yeah.
I think Skip Martin over at Romacraft, he'll have like a barber pole.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a saber tooth. I forget.
I think so. Yeah, because saber tooth has a weird kind of green stripe on it. Yeah.
And so all of these things, they come and go, and no one's reinventing the wheel. It's really just getting, using things. The word Maduro means ripe. It's a dark cigar. Well, darker than Maduro was Oscuro. No one really uses Oscuro. And then LaFleur started using the word Oscuro. So that word came back. And like I said, it's not reinventing the wheel. But what I love is that when these terminologies get used, you can always trace them back to the history. And then if people want to learn, they can learn more about the industry and where we came from. The American Market Selection, the Candelas, where did that come from? And there's a long history of that. But
it's great that people are starting to reuse these words, right? Because then it does re-showcase a history, and that's what cigars are. They're history, especially history in America.
100%.
And I guess too, you can't, with cigars specifically, with the tobacco, since you're using 100% tobacco, there really is only so much you can do with cigars. Like you said, it's nothing really new. It's just resurfaced.
Yeah.
Because it was we didn't really like this. It died out, but now we figured out a way to use it and make it pleasing and appealing to new consumers.
Yep.
So it's, like they say, trends every, 20 years, whatever, they come back. So it's not, like you said, reinventing the wheel, but you figured out a way to bring it back and make it maybe better than it was before.
We see that with hybriding of seeds.
Yeah.
When you see a cigar, maybe the description says they're using Criollo 98. Well, the tobacco's not from 1998. The seed strain, the Criollo seed, is so susceptible to blank shank and blue mold and all these diseases. And it's a very small plant. Doesn't produce a lot of leaves compared to the plants we have today. So a lot of people got away from using those. Then in 98, someone hybrid the Criollo with another seed strain in 98 and created a bigger plant, more resistant to black shank and blue mold, great flavor. So we see that. And the Corojo 99 is the same thing. It was developed so we see some hybriding and things like that. But for the most part, I mean, it is, your little tricks of the trade, where are you growing the tobacco? What was the weather pattern like that year? Whoever's fermenting it, what are their tricks with fermentation or their aging process or their blending process? That's where I think the art is, where you're getting away from science, you get a little bit more in the art of the industry, which is great because, you can say, a lot of people say Pepin has a lot of black pepper in his cigars, or LaFleur has that punch. Everyone's got their something, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and two, we've seen different regions come up throughout history. Like they started growing tobacco in different parts of Central America or in Africa.
Yep.
So it's like almost like one of the only things you can do now is try and find a new region where you can successfully grow good premium cigar tobacco.
Yeah.
And hopefully, it tastes great and it's a new signature. I mean, we have Florida sun-grown tobacco now that's kind of bringing Florida tobacco back because Florida used to be a place where tobacco was grown regularly.
Absolutely.
That died out as well. And now we have Jeff kind of bringing that back here. So I think we will probably see a few new regions maybe come up in the future.
Yeah. Cameroon, wrapper from Cameroon, Africa is very difficult to get, right? It's really one family that kind of dominates that. The French brought Cameroon seed, which is a Sumatra seed, to Africa. And then the family, Mirafil family is in charge of it. They sell a lot of it to Fuente. I know EPC just put out a new cigar, Indoor, which has a genuine African Cameroon wrapper. Very hard to get.
Yeah.
So then you have people like Aladino, the family behind Aladino, the Aurora family. They're growing that seed, but they're growing in Honduras. So you have a Honduran Cameroon wrapper, right? So that's filling a void because not enough Cameroon wrappers available to people. So getting unique about where you're growing things or those are really kind of, I think, today's creativities where you're growing stuff. You see broadleaf being grown in Pennsylvania now, you know, in the Black Patch region of Pennsylvania, because there's not enough broadleaf coming out of Connecticut. So it's quite interesting to see where everything's kind of going. With growing.
I mean, anywhere you grow is going to have different nutrients in the ground, right? And, you know, you see different countries, different areas that have similar nutrients that, you know, I mean, for example, growing rice, you know, in like China or Japan, the equivalent here is Georgia. You could grow rice very well in Georgia. And, you know, you go to any place in the world, it's going to taste different. You could have the same seed in 10 different places and it's going to have a drastically different taste.
Yeah. And then you have people that have been trying to grow tobacco that's as similar as they can to what Cuban cigars used to be like. People are looking for that Cuban style flavor of cigar. Yeah. So people are using different seeds, trying to find a region that's similar in the nutrients they used to have in the soil and the climate and everything like that.
You definitely, after the revolution, saw that. When all the Cuban cigar makers fled, they were trying to find places that resembled Pinar del Rio in Cuba. You know, where can we find the Dominican? They went to Nicaragua, they went to Ecuador, Panama, they went all over looking for the similar, and now they don't need that necessarily. They're looking for regions that have their own uniqueness to it. You know, Ometepe in Nicaragua, you know, has a very unique characteristic, not like Cuba. And so we're seeing a much more, to me, much more open kind of, let's have fun with this. Let's look for different regions. Let's look at different seed strains that grow in different areas. So, which I think is great for, if you're a cigar smoker today, the cigars you have available today are just incredible. The quality, the consistency, and the variety is incredible. Even though all of that being said, we aren't reinventing the wheel. Tobacco is tobacco. And there's basis of how you grow it. There's basis of how you ferment it. And then there's unique things you can do to make your signature, you know. But
like you said earlier,
it's agricultural. Yeah. You know.
And it's all rolled the same. Like you said, the factories really haven't changed at all. It's the same style. People still make handmade wooden boxes. They could make them with machines, but people still choose to do it by hand. Paint them by hand, design them all by hand. So the whole industry is basically built on old-fashioned ways of creating this product.
Yeah, it is. It's and when you think about things that are as handmade as a cigar, there are not many things left in this world. I mean, you look at your cell phone, you look at your computer, your car, you know, the days of, you know, my grandfather being able to go to his, you know, pop the trunk or the hood, hood of your car. And now your car is a computer, right? And there's something that I love about cigars is that when you light a cigar, there's nothing digital about this. It is very old school. You're lighting a flame to these leaves. And it is very much archaic, old school, however you want to use the word.
It's not corrupted by like the human invention, so to say.
And so I need to invent like a smart lighter or kind of like.
I was going to say,
like the furthest
I use my my electric lighter to light my cigar usually.
Yes.
Well, good thing he's got a battery, not like plug it into the wall, you know?
No, plug it into the wall. Yeah, old school. Yeah.
That would be great. Come over and light my cigar. My cord's not that long.
I didn't charge it.
I saw like recently a house, you know, made in like 20s, I think, or 20s, 30s, somewhere around that time frame, where, you know, back they had knob and tube and everything. So they had a lighter built into the house where it had 2 wires coming in on each side, and when you pull it, it sparks the actual electricity from the house. It sparks the flint or the wick, and then lights it, and then you can light your cigarette in your house, which is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah,
but
I mean, a lot of fires back then, you know.
Oh yeah.
But even with furniture, a lot of people don't have authentic wood furniture. It's fake wood that they can mass produced,
veneered,
overseas,
tooled, machine tooled. Yep.
Yeah, especially you're getting cabinets. To find a traditional cabinet maker that's going to make everything in walnut or oak or whatever, it's very hard, especially down here in Florida. Northeast area, that trade is still being passed down. Yeah, not to the extent it was, but it's very difficult to find that handmade.
Sometimes
stuff.
In the Northeast, you can go to some tobacco shops that bought their display cases from someone who bought it from somebody, and you'll see a display case with stickers from 1905, 1910, and this piece of furniture is absolutely gorgeous, and it was all handmade. Yeah, it takes 10 people to move the thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. And those things are still around today, man.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, we have a cedar chest upstairs. We hold cigars in, and that thing was made in, I think, the 40s or 50s. Mm-hmm. And the seal on it, it's old copper seals. Yeah. And it seals better than any, modern humidor you can find.
You're not going to find that stuff in IKEA,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the problem is, obviously, the material's gotten more expensive, but the labor, too, you have to take that into account, which I think is the main reason why cigars prices have increased so much. Yep. It's more of the labor and not the fact that the leaf got more expensive.
Right.
Because that's really one of the reasons why cigars, they are more expensive, but it's still pretty obtainable to get a $3-4 cigar because it really is just leaves that you grew from a seed. Yeah. So the price increases is a combination of, inflation from the labor, you have to pay everyone, cost of business, everything
tax
like that.
Tax of import, has gone up. Yeah. When I started in this business, we would pay a nickel to import to the U.S. Now it's 50 cents to import a cigar. Yeah, you know what I mean. And if you can multiply that out by 1 million cigars, that's a real number.
Is it per stick or per box?
Mm-hmm.
Per stick or
per stick?
box?
Per stick.
Yeah, because the cigar itself really could cost 25 cents if you really break it down. Mm-hmm. Once you export it, that's another 50 cents. Mm-hmm. You put the band on it, that's another 50 cents or $1. Everyone that's handled that cigar, you got to take that cost into account.
Shipping has gone through the roof. I'm sure you guys, just ordering stuff off the internet these days, shipping has gone through the roof. If you take a $14 cigar today and you put it in a calculator of what that cigar would have cost in 92, it's gone with inflation. It's not really out of the ballpark. It really is not that crazy. You know what I mean?
So it's like the real price of it hasn't really changed much. Yep. It's just all the stuff you have to add on with inflation, whether it's labor or with just the prices, like you said, exporting.
Yeah. I met a guy in, I keep talking about Michigan. I'm not from Michigan, but I've spent a lot of time there. I remember I met a guy, he stopped smoking for like 30 years. And he came to a cigar store and he used to smoke punches. Mm. And I remember sitting in the lounge with this guy and he said, man, so I used to pay $1 for this cigar. He goes, now it's like $6. This is a long time ago. Yeah. And he said, they've really gone up. And I was joking with him, but sort of not a joke. I said, the cigar still costs the same. But now the state of Michigan and the federal government now wants more money. So you're still paying the same price for that cigar. Now you got to, the guys that are fleecing for it. Yeah. And look, labor's gone up. Shipping has gone up, but raw material has gone up a little bit as well. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of leaves rolled up.
Absolutely, and as I said, it's very old school product. It's agricultural product, and when you have something agricultural, the amount of labor that goes into producing any product agriculturally has gone through the roof. Yeah. There's an egg shortage in the country right now. Mm-hmm. There's vegetables have gone up, meat has gone up. And
it's crazy. Sometimes you walk into the grocery store and it's like, all the eggs are gone. Just randomly on a Wednesday. You're like, okay, that's weird.
And I think the cigar industry, though, is in a very healthy place. We've fought the FDA pretty good. We've won some battles. I think probably for the next 10 years or so, as long as we keep doing what we're doing, the organizations keep doing what they're doing, I'm happy to see some of the big brands that kind of left the PCA are now coming back to support the PCA. Mm-hmm. The PCA, Josh and his team over there in DC, they've spent a lot of time in protecting our right to smoke cigars. They have to work with both Republicans and Democrats and independents, and they're constantly working on protecting this product. Mm-hmm. And there are big companies, the Generals and the Altituses and the Drew Estates of the world that are big corporate owned, but by far more of the brands are owned by independent individuals like Crown Heads, Oz, Tatuaje, My Father, Padron, more independently owned than the big guys. And we need someone to fight for us, you know? When you look at the way the things pass and how you get support in DC, it takes a lot of money. And so when we're all united as an industry, we're much more protected in protecting this product and protecting this hobby for the next generation.
And we've seen it on our end a lot. A lot of people still don't understand cigars, meaning they don't realize that it is 100% tobacco. A lot of people still think that it's like a big cigarette with a bunch of additives and stuff that. They don't know the process of how it's made. So you can imagine that, like you said earlier, the people in DC that are out of touch with almost everything think the same way and think that a cigar is exactly like a cigarette, but worse because it's bigger. So that's even worse than cigarettes. But a lot of people just don't understand.
And that's where PCA and CRA are constantly out there educating politicians and bringing people like Rocky Patel and the Padron family and Mike Conder, who's one of the owners of Crown Heads, has spent a lot of time in DC. Alan Rubin, who used to own Alec Bradley Cigars. These guys would spend so much time in DC. A lot of that time was educating politicians on what makes a cigar, because there's so many politicians that it looks the same to a cigarette, just bigger. And we had to educate them. And we find that when you do educate people, they tend to say, okay, I see the difference. And I see that you guys aren't trying to advertise the kids. You guys it's an adult hobby. And it has a long history. And so I believe we keep on that path. And through shows like this, where you guys are educating consumers, people are tuning in to listen to cigars, but also hopefully learn something about cigars. And they hopefully take that, share with their friends, and then hopefully we'll just have a better educated group of people out there. You know, let's say you smoke cigar, and let's say you have a family member who doesn't, and then they'll ask you, what are you smoking cigarettes or cigars for? And you're able to educate them. Hopefully they'll say, it's not for me, but I totally respect your right to be able to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I remember when I first started smoking cigars, I came back home one time when I still lived with my parents, and my mom was like, "Why do I smell menthol?" And I was like, "You don't." She's like, "No, I smell menthol." I'm like, "I promise you don't smell menthol." She's like, "Oh, the cigars, they have all this stuff in them." And I'm like, "No, they actually don't." It took like a year to actually convince her that cigars, really, it's just 100% tobacco, no additives in there. There is no menthol in there or anything like that.
I mean, you see the old people in our industry living to like they're 90, 100 years old.
Yeah.
And even the U.S. federal government, this is, maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, they did a study. A person that smoked, don't quote me on this, but
the FDA study?
Yeah, it was like 3 or 4 cigars a month or a day had the same death and mortality rate as a non-smoker.
Yeah, 3 cigars. It was 3 cigars a day. If you smoked 3 cigars a day, your increased chance of, basically bad health is like 1%. So 3 cigars every single day, you're really only at a negative increase of 1%.
Yeah. And that's the government. You know what I mean? So,
and a lot of cigar smokers aren't doing 3 cigars a day or even 1 cigar a day.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it's maybe 2 or 3 times a week. They'll go to the lounge and smoke with their buddies or whatever. But majority of the people that smoke cigars, they work all the time or they're busy with their lives. They really only have 1 or 2 days a week to actually enjoy a cigar.
Yeah. And we, a big part of our business, you can go to any cigar shop, and when golfing season's in full effect, their business increases, because a lot of those guys and women who golf and smoke, they're a big part of our consumer base, but they don't smoke during the wintertime. So they're smoking, that window of spring and summer, maybe late fall, and then they don't smoke again until golfing's back. So yeah.
Especially if you're up north and you don't have a lounge to go to. You're not gonna be able to smoke when it's negative 2 degrees outside, because you got an hour long cigar.
Yeah,
most people aren't going to sit out there for an hour in the freezing cold and smoke a cigar with their gloves on.
Little spoiled down here in Florida.
Very.
Yeah, I mean, we see it. I mean, all year round, to be honest with you. But that's why cigar shops here open up so early. Yeah, people will go grab their sticks before they go, golfing or even to the beach. We see a lot of people, I'm going to the beach trip, so let me go buy 10 cigars. Me and my buddies, and then That's it.
That's about the only reason why I go to a cigar lounge at 9 a.m. is because I'm going somewhere else after. I'm like, I need a couple extra cigars.
Yeah, absolutely. And you always go to see what's new. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's I think part of the fun. It's like anything else, man. It's like I always want to know what's new, what's different.
Yeah.
That's what's great about our trade show that we have every year. PCA. This year it's in New Orleans in April. It's that one time of the year where you can see all the new releases, all the unique stuff. What's somebody doing that's different, or what's someone bringing something back that was out and that's brought back in now that's in. It's I would imagine, I don't know because my whole life is cigars, but if you're in electronics, I'm sure it's the same way, video games or whatever it is, and cigars are not addictive, but I tell people the culture is.
For sure.
It really
culture is what's addictive because you meet other people.
Yeah.
You have this common thread. I met I keep going back to Michigan, but I remember when I started with CAO Cigars. It's probably 20 years ago. I remember I met a guy in a cigar lounge in Roseville, Michigan. Him and another guy were smoking in the lounge, and they went to high school together. They both worked for Ford. One guy worked on the line, and the other guy was some executive boss dude, right? And they were saying, "Hey, we smoke the same cigar, and we never see each other at work. We're two different worlds, but we hang out in the same cigar shop, and we smoke the same cigar." I always thought, man, that is incredible. You have this guy, grease on his outfit. He works on the line in Ford, and then you got this other guy who has a suit on, and their crosses will never pass each other. Yeah. But in a cigar lounge, they do. Mm-hmm. And that to me is awesome, man. Mm-hmm. That is awesome.
Yeah. But you're right. It's really not addictive because I can leave the state for a week or two and not have a cigar. But I come back and I'm like, oh, I want to go to the lounge because my friends are there and all the guys that I like talking to are there.
Yep.
But the culture is definitely addictive for sure.
The culture is. I mean, it's exciting.
Because you have people that are from all different parts of life, different walks of life, that come together and treat each other as equals.
Yep.
We're all friends.
Yep.
So that's really what the addictive part is being treated with the same respect that, you treat others. Everyone's treated equally. Everyone's hanging out for the most part. There's really no like bad blood when you go to the cigar lounge and it's like, oh, so-and-so's here. Everyone's chill.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I always say cigar guys tend to be very, very generous. You always have an extra cigar. You're always giving it to somebody. I've seen it, when my kids were younger, maybe there's soccer practice or football practice. You see one parent all smoking a cigar and then another parent goes out there and says, I got a cigar for you.
Yeah.
Cigar people tend to be very generous.
For sure.
A lot of these cigar companies have their own charities.
Yeah.
A lot of cigar factories in Nicaragua and the Dominican, they'll have a nurse on site. They'll have babysitters on site. A lot of these charities, Fuente is one of them, has a great charity that they do with the Newman family. And a lot of that came from because a lot of people didn't want our money to donate. So, because we're tobacco, people don't want to take our donations. So a lot of these cigar companies had to create their own charities to give back to these countries or back to the organizations. And so whenever someone puts a roadblock up, our industry finds a way to go around it. And to me, that's I'm very proud of that.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it really is a great industry. And having people like you that have been in it for so long and are so educated about what it seems like to me is every aspect of the industry is great to have because people can learn about what the industry really is about. There's not as many negative things as people think. There's actually quite a lot of positive things.
Yep.
Even when you're talking about, donations and different foundations that have been created in the cigar industry, it's a great industry. It really is.
And there's never ending amount of people that want to get into it.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
always new and exciting things. And it is generational. You know what I mean? When you see these just pass on from generation to generation, it's really in your blood. I always use the story of the Tarano family. The Tarano family sold. But now it's owned by CI, General Cigar, their parent company, which is Scandinavian Tobacco, right? But at one time, Taranos were family owned. They started in 1917, maybe 1916 in Cuba. And the 80s were a rough time in the cigar industry in the United States. It was very, very rough. It was an older guys thing. Women weren't really smoking. The older guys were dying out. There really wasn't that next generation to take cigars. And I remember Charlie Tarano, his father ran a Tarano cigar company in the 80s. And he told his son, Charlie, he said, Charlie, this industry is not going to be around for you. You need to go to school, get your education. Charlie wound up going and becoming a lawyer. But then the boom hit. And Charlie got pulled into the industry. And Charlie then ran Toraño all the way to the point where they sold it to the big conglomerate, right? That is a perfect example of a family that had been in it 4 or 5 generations. Now, there are some family members that are still involved. Jack Toraño, who is related to Charlie. Jack is the national sales manager for Espinosa Cigars. And then you have Carlos Yaca Toraño, who's head of operations for Gurkha. So you still have Toraños involved in the industry. But that could have, in the 80s, it could have died out and could have ended there. Yeah. But it's, and Charlie's father, I think, was the 2nd or 3rd generation. And through a revolution, getting kicked out of their own country, having to establish in a foreign country where they didn't speak the language, United States, reestablish it. When you see these guys who fled Cuba and they started the industry in the Dominican, or they started the industry in Nicaragua, man, I mean, it could have easily died out. It could have easily died out, and these people persevered. The Fuentes, they had a factory burn in Nicaragua. They had a factory burn in the Dominican. Yeah. They could have at any time thrown in the towel, but the culture and the history was worth keeping alive. Yeah. And that, to me, is kind of a great case study for what our industry is no matter what you do, no matter what, our industry is going to survive, and we're going to thrive and find a way.
Yeah, very true. Because even if you think about a lot of the factories that are still operational today, a lot of them are generationally owned that were passed down. Because you know how hard it would be to get up and start a whole new tobacco farm and a tobacco factory. That takes a lot of money and a lot of manpower. But a lot of the people that are producing cigars, it's been passed down from generations. A
lot of farmers. Yeah. A lot of farmers. And you meet farmers in Ecuador growing a lot of great wrapper that's being used, Ecuador, Connecticut, Ecuador, Havana, which is dominating the industry. A lot of them, it's their grandfather started planting tobacco, and then their father, and then now it's onto the 3rd generation. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, that's knowledge, history. There's easier ways to make money, and to keep it alive, I think, is awesome.
Yeah.
And all of us play a little part in it, right? Whenever my time to go or retire, I'd like to think, I gave more to the industry than I took. You guys doing this podcast, sharing it with people, is so important, that we are able to share these stories, share the information, and people consume information differently than they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So we were talking TikTok or Instagram or whatever. There's this incredible way to reach out and touch these consumers and I would say that our industry as makers of cigars aren't very good with technology, right? Our factories, cigars are rolled the same damn way they were, 100 years ago. Now we're using draw masters. That's probably the most technologically advanced thing in our industry. And there is no machine that goes and picks leaves in the tobacco. They're still picked one by one, and it's not plant by plant. It's leaf by leaf. Yeah. Because the plant matures at different levels. So you start at the bottom, Seco, Viso, and then you pick the Ligero. And so I don't know if our industry would have been savvy enough to reach out to consumers on these levels, but it was guys like you who have the knowledge, who have the passion, that were able to take these stories and share them on a different level. And now you see guys like Fuente and Carlito. He was never on social media. Now he's all over social media. Yeah. If you loved, in the 90s, if you loved a particular brand, you could only meet the owner of that brand if he came through your town and you were home at a cigar shop. Yeah. Now you can shoot a message directly to the Crown Heads on Instagram or Pete Johnson Tatuai, and it'll go straight to the guy. That is absolutely amazing. If you love Ferraris, you can send him a message. Listen, it's not getting to the guys at the top. You know what I mean? But the fact that you can shoot Steve Saka a message and Steve's answering you, this industry is very much still very much
down to earth,
attainable, down to earth, and very connected to people. And I think that's why the big brands obviously do incredible, but they usually don't have a face. And that's why I think the independent boutique brands still have this incredible advantage, because there is a person that you can connect and link to and know their story. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, that was a great conversation. Miguel, I really appreciate you for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you guys for inviting me. As I said, doing these kind of things I love. I love being able to talk to other guys at Cigars. Obviously, I've met you before at events and things. So great to be invited onto the show, man.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And thank you guys for tuning in and learning a little bit more about the cigar industry. Until next time, see you later.
See you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cigar Guys podcast. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Looking for short-form content? Check out all our social media accounts in the description below.